and welcome to Yachting Monthly's how-to series, brought to you in association with GJW Direct. I'm Matthew Sheehan, and over the course of 13 episodes we're going to be dealing with some of the key issues when it comes to maintenance and talking to some of the experts to get their tips.
Hello there, my name's Bonney from Performance Rigging down on the Hamble. Nice sunny morning, and we're going to lead you through a brief introduction to looking at your mast and looking for any items that might be of interest. So starting at the top, I tend to start at the top, it doesn't matter. We check the lights are secure, check the nuts and bolts are all done up. These have got spring washers, so that's good. I notice this nylock here is barely engaged on the nylock, so there's a chance that might come undone. So that's a slight concern. We'd like to see a couple of threads, 2 or 3 threads showing through. So then we look at the masthead. So this is a small boat, but if you're worried about any damage, we can always get a straight edge out, because what might happen is this, the forestay or the backstay might be overloaded and we might end up bending the masthead. It's possible. We then want to look at these corners to make sure there's no stressing, burring, movement and damage, one thing and another. Cables are nice and secure, and a mouse line for another cable should you need it. Sheaves, on an older boat I'd use a screwdriver, and all you can do, you just go in there and push up on the sheave and see how much movement. There's a little movement here, which is fine. If it's perfectly tight it probably wouldn't go round, so a little movement's fine. The pin is obviously in here, so should you need to change the sheave you have to take the head off. Take the head off, you've got to take the mast out. A common problem with furling head sawls and with halyards very close to the forestay attachment, if you imagine the halyards coming out over the sheave, that is nearly parallel. And by the time you've got your swivel on here, because that allows the thing to spin, you'll end up with it wrapping round. 2 options: you can put a deflector here, which then would deflect the halyard like that, or as this mast has got, it's got a separate sheave, which is quite common, which gives us our deflection, and that stops the wrap. Coming down to the cap shroud, so this is the cap shroud, T-terminal, standard sort of fitting, 6mm wire. So we're going to be looking at, on an older mast, the T-terminals tend to break in here, so we're looking for cracks or damage in here. This is quite a high load area, so we're looking for damage on the backing plate. We're looking for damage around the mast, so there might be corrosion. I can't see any anti-corrosion in there. And if you're worried about any damage to the mast, just put a straight edge on it. Obviously put it in line with the mast, and if it rocks, you know you've got a bit of a bulge going on here, which ought to be addressed. And maybe fit a doubler, or at least get somebody to come and have a look at it, because that means the mast wall is suffering. And very often, if you can get the light just right, I call it crazy paving. Imagine your patio, it's crazy paving, and if you get the light just right, you can see like crazy paving in the anodizing, and that means it's been stressed. But you just got to get the light right, and then it stands out really clearly. So if walking down the mast, fundamentally the tube is good. Probably just run your hands down any dents or anything, any damage, probably from impact rather than anything else. So here we are on a sheave, example of testing the sheave. So I just put the screwdriver in and just gently, you can see it moves slightly, and it will, a new one will. I'm not worried about that. It's trying to decide what's excessive. And if it didn't move at all, it probably means it's seized, so we need to look at that as well. Rivets are good, all nice and secure. The halyard looks all right, or it's a pole-less, but halyard, it all looks okay. So coming down the mast, we've come to the steaming light. So we'll just make sure it's nice and secure. That's a bit loose, I've just done that up. Nice cable, grommet as well, which is unusual. That's all good. Whilst we're here, we can check the joints in the furling system. Once there's a gap there, that's standard and normal on this system, and this is all, as I say, it's all brand new, so we're not expecting any problems. Moving down to the spreader, there's quite a lot of action going on in this area, so I've taken this T-terminal out. So this is where we're looking for that crack we mentioned earlier, so we're looking in that area, and any deformation. Make sure the swages are good. This has been done by, and it's marked with a 7, so that's a 7mm piece of wire. It looks nice, it looks even, it looks straight, so we're not worried about that. And that will hook in there. I'll just hook it in to show you how it goes. So engage the bottom, there we go, and that's that in. And then we'd normally pull that down a little bit so it doesn't accidentally fall out. So that's, again, we would check the same points as we saw earlier around the backing plate, check the rivets, check for corrosion. So that one's done. This one is slightly different. This is what's called a stem ball or an elephant's foot. Nice, it's been greased. They aren't greased. That doesn't need greasing. That one should be greased. And it just sits in a seat in the spreader root, and it just pulls down and engages. Potential failures for wire on wire terminals is it will break something like 3mm inside, and I think we can show you some examples of that later, but ordinarily under load the wire is stretched enough that that strand will pop out. So if you look up the rig when you're on the deck and the mast is up, if you see it looks a bit fluffy in this area, you think, well, that looks a bit odd. It could be the strand has popped out, is now free, and not obviously doing any work, and that means it has to be replaced. And if one's gone, probably find that when you actually come to it and bend the wire around a little bit, 2 or 3 will pop out, and that is a failure. So it'll be somewhere in there, just about 3mm inside, on all wire terminals. The reason we get the failure on the wire in this position is if the T, and I liken it to a hanging basket when you sit in it, basket chair, that would naturally hang at an angle, and if the shroud base is different, the wire is going to bend at this point here. So this is the primary bend, they call it. This is the secondary bend, and sometimes you have to adjust the secondary bend to make sure that the centre line of the swage follows the centre line of the wire. Otherwise you get this little kink, and that's going to stress the wire. So now to the spreader. First thing I want to do is check there's not any movement, and this is like brand new, so I'm not expecting any, and that's really good. If there was any movement, we'd be looking in these areas around here, stressing around here, and stressing around the pin. But that looks nice and secure. And if we go to the end of the spreader, we've got the spreader end. Make sure it's secured by that screw in there, which you actually engage from this side and wind it into the spreader. And it's clamped, because that's what stops the spreader moving, because the shroud's coming at an angle here and then turns here and goes down parallel with the mast. So the temptation is for the spreader to work its way down the shroud, and eventually they'll just be hanging like a seagull's wings, and then they're not doing any work, and they'll just snap off and we'll have loads of problems. So nicely clamped here. There's the clamping screw in there, and there is a secondary hole here because of course some masts have 2 shrouds going through here. So it's the one that comes in at the angle is clamped. The one that's coming down from higher up would just be free flowing. We've looked at the spreaders, spreader brackets, attachments of the terminals. Moving down, we come to the halyard exits. Not normally a problem, only if the mast has been really, really loaded. You might get, because there's quite a few holes, you might get some distortion in the mast here. So and it's rare, but you can get your straight edge out again and just check there's no. If you imagine there's a hump, we'll get a gap, and then we'll think, oh, there's something going on. So just check they're secure, just secured with a rivet. And these stop the halyards from chafing on the side of the mast wall, because if you look, they're all quite curved and smooth to save chafe. And there's a little tongue in there which protects higher up. Coming down, it's a bit buried here. So this is our furling system. This is where we attach the halyard to there. Sails attached to there. So this is obviously static to the mast, and this allows the whole lot to turn. So we want to check that's nice and free, which it is. Just a smear of grease on this one, which you can get to. So there's ball bearings. You can just see them in there. There's ball bearings in there. So just a smear, like a toothpaste cap tube, just a tiny bit of a thimble, something like that, and just smear it in and rub it around. It doesn't need loads and loads. An alternative, if you're not happy with grease, is some McLubes, like a silicone spray, to make sure that it's free. It doesn't take a lot. Check the feeder is attached, still attached. Check there's no bends in this area, because there's quite often that can bend, because when you furl, the foot comes up and then you end up with the thing trying to bend. So check there's no bends here, and then coming down, check the joints again. So coming down, check cleats are secure. There's the mainsail feeder, check that's operating correctly. Gooseneck toggle, this is a stainless one, Again, it's not been used, so I'm not expecting any problems. On an older bracket, I'd expect to see wear in the aluminium, because that's stainless, this is stainless, so with the load coming on from the boom, I'd expect this pin to move. And I normally regard, or I used to regard, if that toggle has started to hit that web, it's worn. But I think with these new toggles, because these are quite new, you just got to make a judgment. You see, there's still a little bit of movement, and this is all brand new. So we accept that. That won't wear on that. That will wear on that. And when the boom is on, because the boom's aluminium, it will possibly rock around like that and wear the inside of the boom. So if you can, you want to space it so it's nice and tight, so the boom is not rocking around, because that won't wear, because it's stainless. The boom is aluminium, and that will wear. On an older mast, you can still get which you can obviously with this, if you can get the bracket, you can just drill it out with care, because there may be conduit wires running behind here, so you need to be careful. Just drill the head off, don't go right through, drill the head off, punch the rivet out. This one has the part number written on it. It's a bit hard to read, but it's actually written on it. So you can order another part number, get the right rivets, and get somebody, probably because you won't have the rivet gun sufficiently big, to re-rivet it back on, and they are readily available. Older ones may not be, and if it's very old, you may have to get it custom made. If you've got we may see it later, a custom gooseneck, which is welded on, and you end up with wearing these webs, all you can do is drill it out and make some top hat bushes, so it literally is like a top hat, and they poke in, and the rim of the hat sits here, and then you can put your toggle back in, and then it's all, but it is a bit of a fiddle. We are doing one at the moment. So moving on down, so that's a high load area. When you think about the loads on the booms and jibing and the tension from the kicker. So it leads us on to the kicker. Same thing, same toggle, same bracket, high load. See, this one does move a little bit, but again, we're not worried about that. This is a casting after all. So then check all the rivet heads are on, check there's no evidence of lifting because of the load that's been applied. Come down, check the wiring where it exits. Sometimes you see how it exits very close to the step. The wires might get trapped. They're all nice and good, they're fine. Check it's secure again. Check the rivets, same. And then we look at the rig, well, we'll carry on with the furling gear. So here we've got a link plate to extend the drum above the deck for whatever reason. Nice plate, nice and secure. Presumably there's another toggle. Ordinarily I'd go to the boat and check there's a toggle on the boat. Check the drum's free, check there's no damage, so the tack's free. Check it's been put on properly. It appears to be. I haven't seen this in operation, but you know, it all appears okay. So we've got some self-fit terminals. You can't really tell what's going on inside, but hopefully it's all been done correctly. And if you look at the threads, they're showing about 3 threads, and they're all consistent, so it would suggest they're all the same, and we can only hope they're all good. And there's a typical ring screw with the split pins in still, and it all looks fine. All the threads are fine. Check the threads are nice and even, they're not distorted at all, and that they're all turns. Check the toggle. Quite common for them to break again. It's going to break on these areas at the top of the curve. Again, we'll be able to show you that later. Check the pins are all. Just have a good look round. You're looking for any cracks, distortion. Make sure the pin's secure because it can come out again. It's just sort of eyeball really. Just test everything, touch everything, see how it feels. So whilst we're here, down at the base of the mast, this is where all the compression from all the rigging and all the weight of the sails lands here on this shoulder of the heel. So you want to be making sure there's no, it's landing nicely, so if there's a little lip all the way around, I can feel with my screwdriver. So it's all good, and there's no bulging. An older mast, it might start to blow open. Not just at the back, but that is an open area, so it's unsupported. There's some metal inside, but the back is unsupported, so it could blow open, as I call it, and come down over the heel. It's unusual, but this is where all your weight, all the load is coming on. So it's a high load area again. It's very wet inside. There's a lot of water can run down the inside of a mast. This is cast aluminium, with an aluminium extrusion, so we're not expecting too much corrosion. The water can come out. There's plenty of room in this case, the water can come out. But again, it is possible that you get corrosion in this area, depending on the exact mast that you've got. So we've just looked at this new mast. We weren't expecting any problems. We haven't really found any problems, luckily. We're now going to go and have a look at some items that refer to what we've spoken about here, so you know what we're looking for, rather than us just pointing out, look here, look here. We'll actually see things broken or bent and damaged. We have a chamber of horrors here just to run through and show you some of the things we've been discussing. So if I start over on this side, we'll start on sheaves. So here, I think you can see the sheaves dropped. See the gap at the top, should be a gap at the bottom. So in extreme, that's what's happened. And you can see that's similar damage. So that's jammed onto there, same as that. So this pin would have been in, I think it's this same sheave, I can't be sure, but it illustrates how the sheave can collapse under excessive load. It could be somebody's used a power winch and forgotten to take the button off the switch, a hand off the switch. Who knows? But that is extreme wear. You don't often see that. You don't often see that. But it's just to demonstrate it can happen. So if your halyard starts being really tight, hard to pull up, is the sheave working? So that's an illustration of that. So here we have it's minor, and you may not be able to see it, but it's been rubbed away at the edge. So if your halyard's running over, there's a chance it'll roll off the side. Again, same sort of idea. And you can hear it. If you're pulling a halyard up, you'd hear it rattling. You'd go clonk, 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 clonk. And basically the same again here. You've got movement. You've got wear, and it's not a round, no longer a round hole. This one happens to be bushed. We spoke earlier about forestays and the halyard leads. So this is what we call a halyard wrap, or what I would call a pig's tail, because it looks like a pig's tail. So this has been caused by the halyard wrapping around the forestay and you pulling to furl, or putting it on a winch and keep going and keep going and keep going, and eventually you end up with this sort of thing. So that is condemned. That has to be changed and sorted out, and can usually be resolved by your lead from your slider to the mast. And we talked about swages. So this one looks perfectly all right. You could look at that and say, no, that's absolutely fine. Oops. So this is a forestay toggle. Quite likely it's had a halyard wrap as well, but the toggle's distorted. It should look more like that. And then this one, I'll hold it there. So that was rig inspection, see the crack, hanging on by a thread. I mean, that's like next time you go sailing. That's a forestay toggle. So that's fractional rig, swept spreaders, probably would have come down. Classic toggle failures. These aren't made anymore, I don't think, so I don't think it will upset anyone. But yeah, the classic, where the metal's bent the maximum load, breaks, which is not dissimilar. So when we look at our rigging screws, see how that pin's worked its way out? So that's hanging on by half. So of course it's trying to pull out, not dissimilar to all those. So they're all sort of rigging screw and toggle failures. And again, it's quite a lot of wear on the toggle. I don't know if you can see it in the camera there. Just that lip of wear around there. And there, see how it's slightly distorted. So you probably, well, we've changed that. And also the pin is undersized pin for the hole. We talked about deflectors. This is back to your halyard wraps and your furling gears. Now this has had a wire halyard on it. Fairly rare these days, but the wire has just worn away and worn away and worn away. These can be replaced, but you see how hard it's worked doing its job of making sure you don't get a halyard wrap. But you can take that off and put another one on, but your wire halyard might get chewed up in there, it might damage the wire halyard, it might break, it might jam, so you just want to change it, or go to a rope halyard. If you change from wire to rope, obviously you need to change that and maybe look at all the other things at the masthead, that there's not other chafe and sharp edges that will damage your expensive new halyard. So now we go to the T terminal, which is that idea terminal which you saw earlier. Cracking there. Corrosion, look. So this has never had anything on it to protect it. Another one, a different make. It's been quite well loaded. Around here, see the burring. And it was probably hanging inside the mast, and then when you looked at it closely, looking for cracks across the top, if you look in the corners, you'll see the crack. Take it out, it comes out in 2 halves. Cylinder again, different type. Same with the terminal, hooks in, cracking around the bottom, both sides. We've cleaned this one up, but I don't think it was protected. I can't remember if it's a check stay or runner. T terminal again, but it's half come out. So it's been hanging like that and damaged the backing plate. Backing plate, cracked. Different backing plate. See how that's opened up compared to that? Those sides used to be parallel. So that again, the terminal in there is desperately trying to get out, and that'd be a massive failure. Now, this pin was taken out from under the deck where the chain plate is secured to the side of the boat. So that is classic corrosion, and I haven't seen that before. And it's quite concerning because you'd think that's nice and dry, there's nothing going on, but that's a lot of corrosion. Aluminium pin. Classic break on a snap shackle across the hinge pin there, look. These are fairly rare, not made anymore again, but check the hinge pins. Just open it, try it, turn it over, check it again, check the other side. In-mast furling. So this is the in-mast furling. The rest of the mast is above us. The rest of the, no, it's that way, sorry, I beg your pardon, because that's the hook. So when they're overzealous maybe, or electric furler, it's just broken the foil. So this is at the bottom, that's the tack hook. So that's just completely sheared it off, just through maybe a Halyard wrap, maybe something going on at the top. I can't remember what the problem was, but there's the evidence of fairly substantial shear. So in this Chambers of Horrors, we've got lots of things, but most of them are very readily visible. So if the mast is down and you look at something, you pick up the sheave, it doesn't turn. It doesn't match the other sheave because it's slightly lower, because it's worn. You look for bad wire. Look at the toggles. Actually get your hand down and look at them. Pick them up and have a good look. Because if that was lying, you might not see it if it's lying, or that might be, you wouldn't see it if it's lying like that. So pick it up, turn it over. And if you can't put your nose against it, I say, if you can't really get close to it, you've not inspected it, turn it over. Look at the threads. It is all easily visible, and you don't have to have a degree to see some of these issues. If you have doubts, you can then obviously call in your rigger, your local rigger, to come and have a look and give an opinion, because he'll have obviously vastly more experience. But just have a look, it's an eyeball thing.
Well, thanks for watching. I hope that was of help. Make sure that you like us, make sure that you subscribe to us, and stay in touch for the next episode.